Okay, welcome to this little video. Giggling now because of the way we've kicked off. But I've got Phil, HBP, NLP, and many other businesses that are starting to emerge. And also Ric, who is currently coaching Scott Quigg and has coached many other top level boxers in the past as well. And really we've sort of gathered you and each other together today to talk about mindset. You know, it's incredibly important, this idea of mindset. It's getting bandied around more and more. And I've got what I consider two real mindset experts, and I'm going to throw a bit of input in as well. This has been sort of arranged by Phil and HBP NLP during one of his NLP courses, and we're just going to crack on. So the first question I want to pose to you, really, just to set everything up, when we're talking about fighters, pro fighters, and we're talking about elite level businessmen and women, what percentage is mindset in their success in your opinion?
Start with a big one, eh? Ironically, probably not massive as in percentage wise, but it's the pivotal percentage that's important. So it might only represent the last 5% of what they do, but it's the 5% difference that either separates them from being good at what they do and being great at what they do. We've been chatting this week a lot on the course, and I've been staking my flag in the ground and saying that I believe that still now in sport, most athletes completely neglect mental preparation for performance. They spend a fortune on getting their body in the right condition, all the technical side of whatever sport it is, if it's boxing or whatever sport you want to look at, but the mental side of it, perhaps not so much. And I think no sport epitomises that more than pro football, in my opinion. Woefully inadequate when it comes to any kind of mental preparation. Throwing it right out there on the internet now, so I'll probably get abuse, but I think footballers are perhaps the worst of the sportsmen that I've seen. So what you've got to ask yourself, if you look at our England team, for instance, is why aren't we winning any major trophies? Why are we going out in penalties? Why do we have this absolutely horrendous statistic when it comes to pressurised penalties? And that would be to do with the mental preparation of the players, guaranteed.
Mm. And what about in boxing then?
Yeah, I'd totally agree with Phil. Obviously, boxers are, unique. Boxers, combat sport athletes are unique in that they get punched in the face for a living, and many of them probably say they enjoy it. So I think with that, there is a belief or a perception from the public that they are mentally tough, and there's a belief within themselves that they're also, that their mindset is strong. I think where we really find out about their mindset is when they suffer a defeat, and that's often when perhaps the wheels can come off, and that's when we start being able to elicit change with them and start focusing on developing their mindset and so forth like that. So I totally agree with Phil. It isn't as high as people would think, but I have noticed a trend between fighters who suffer a loss and then carry on to success afterwards will really identify certain elements of their thinking and their mental preparation, really focus on them, and that then often will lead to greater success afterwards.
Yeah. So what have we got?
I was just going to ask that with like success and growth of success for a fighter, do they get to a point when they start to become uncoachable because they've had so much success, and almost like that loss, albeit bad at the time, it makes them reevaluate their approach to coaching and their ability to take on feedback and take on and grow from them?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all the fighters, obviously, that are out there, but each one is different, and yeah, certainly some athletes do achieve that much success and that much wealth that they can become uncoachable, and there's a saying, you like your sayings, but the tail can wag the dog a little bit, and a defeat can often be the best thing that's happened to a combat sport athlete if it's embraced in the right way, because they will then take a look at everything. They will reflect, they will evaluate, and you know, you get to that crossroads where one or two things happens. They can either never recover from it, or often it will, you know, perhaps galvanise them, and they'll move on to even more success.
So what kind of things? I mean, you know, so the top level boxers, even, you know, people in the corporate world that are playing with millions of pounds every second or whatever. You know, what are people doing to manage pre-match nerves? You know, is it routines that you see regularly, or?
Everyone's different. So some people, you know, they almost embrace nerves. You often hear the saying when it comes to people that do like extreme sports, so like Red Bull athletes, that they're adrenaline junkies. Actually, that's actually the opposite of what they are. You find with guys like that, because the adrenaline is the precursor for what they're really after, which is the flow state. Most of the Red Bull athletes, before they do some sort of stunt or jump, and they're experiencing that adrenaline, it's not a nice feeling, because that's their flight response sort of saying, what we're doing this for, you need to get out of here. But what they know is that that's the precursor, if they push on, to getting into flow state, which is the state they're after. That's the state they're addicted to, the state where time sort of stops, their conscious brain just goes to sleep, their unconscious takes over, they stop thinking about what they're doing, they just act in the moment, and there's no consequence in the flow state. It's a primeval state for the last point of survival. It's your brain galvanizing all of its resources to get you out of this situation live. Now that's a very addictive state, because there's lots of hormones getting released in the brain that those athletes are really embracing. Now, nerves is different. I think nerves is adrenaline, nerves is that flight response, it's what we're doing here, let's get out of here. And in my experience, most athletes don't like that. They like the bit that comes after that, if we push through.
Yeah, no, it's same with you, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, athletes, and again I'll speak from a combat sport perspective, they're very habitual people. They all have their habits, they all have their own little way of doing things, and there's a saying in combat sports that a happy fighter is a dangerous fighter. So I think for me it's about, as their coach, it's about developing a routine that keeps them happy in the build-up to performance, as long as that doesn't then go completely out of control, as long as they can maintain the focus on the job in hand and so forth like that. Some athletes, we discussed Steve Collins earlier, didn't we? And that was perhaps the first real example of a combat athlete or boxer using mindset techniques, when he had the headphones on and the visualization and whatnot. And you will get some fighters who like a very calm dressing room. They like certain things to be laid out in certain ways, whereas others will, you know, they'll have music on and they'll be sort of dancing and loosening out. I think as a coach, you've got to allow them to have those habits, but then also some agreed boundaries, and I think that's a key word, some pre-agreed boundaries in place. So we, you know, whilst the guys that like a fairly busy dressing room, we don't want 50 people in there for argument's sake, but then equally the guys that are quite quiet, we have to make sure that they don't go that insular within themselves, that then that completely negates their performance, their ability to get into what, you know, like what Phil called the flow state there, and deliver what they need to do.
So we've talked about mindset. Now, from my experience in the fitness world, you know, people they tend to talk, or everyday people I should say, tend to talk about two things, you know, that they wish they had more of. One, motivation, and the second one being determination. You know, the idea of motivation gets you going, determination keeps you going. So, you know, what kind of things are you going to, what kind of routines and strategies do you use to peak that motivation, you know, to get that?
For me, it depends on how they're motivated. That's the question that should come before it. How are you motivated? Because not everyone's motivated the same. You've got the carrot and the stick. So some people are motivated away from what they don't want to happen. So for instance, if they're trying to lose weight, some people are motivated to move away from the position they're in at the minute, whereas someone that's motivated towards, i.e. more the carrot than the stick, they're going to want to go towards a idyllic future that they can see in the future. Now, both of those, albeit, you know, want the same result, they're represented very different linguistically. You know, one will say, I really don't want to be fat, and one will say, I really want to be thin. Now, that's important that they understand that, because the person that doesn't want to be fat, as they do start to lose weight and they start to change, they move away from the thing that they were trying to get away from, obviously. Now, that what can happen is the motivation can dip for those people, because that becomes a distant memory. And then you can find that they start to, without knowing why, lose motivation. So the key ingredient is knowing how you're motivated. And when you know how you're motivated, you can keep yourself stimulated consistently. If it's the carrot that you're after, then you work towards something and you remind yourself that the goal is getting closer and closer. If it's the stick and it's a waveform, you keep reminding yourself how bad it felt when you were at your lowest point. You keep reinforcing that belief that you never want to go back there. It's the old thing that you either want to be rich or you don't want to be poor. So that's the first part, is motivation. There's two different types, and it's a spectrum as well. There is nothing digital in nature, everything's analog. So you could be very much away from, you could be very much towards, you could be anything in the middle. But you kind of have to sit down and think about what really motivates you. Determination, you've got to find your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? The why is what gives you the energy and the emotion to push through when it's hard. Why did you do the marathon disciples?
Yeah, I've been asked that quite a few times, and my biggest thing was, well, two things. First, I wanted to test myself. I have a saying that how do you know unless you test yourself? So there's that, and then the other one is I wanted to be able to inspire other people.
Yeah.
And that they were the two big driving factors for me. So.
And the second one there is a huge why, because you'll fail at that if you fail at the marathon solvers, because you won't be inspiring people, unless you might inspire people because you've had an injury and they go, well, Craig cracked on. But really, to inspire people to do something, you have to have achieved it yourself first. So that's like a really good why to have, because it's almost like a Ulysses contract. The old Greek mythology of Ulysses, you set yourself a contract that you've got to see through, otherwise it all falls to pieces. You tie yourself to the mast so you can hear the songs of the sirens and your ship doesn't crash. So when you make that statement that you're going to go and do the marathon disciples because you want to show people that a normal guy with ginger hair can go to the desert, and
I'll stay out of the hair conversation. We'll leave that one. Yeah.
But you can go and do that, and then that inspires people to go, well, actually, maybe I can go and do something myself. So Ulysses contracts are brilliant. For me, I think they're fantastic.
So would you agree, what I'm taking from that then, actually, that we talked about motivation and determination being two separate things, that actually determination may well be a constant cycle of motivation being re-stimulated.
Yeah. If you say, for instance, if someone comes to boot camp and you say, why are you here? Why do you want to lose weight? And they say, well, my husband has said that I want to come. That's not very good motivation or determination. It's extrinsic. It's not that person's intrinsic self-belief, their why. When someone's got, I think it was Viktor Frankl said in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, when someone's got a strong enough why, they can withstand anyhow.
Yeah.
And if your why is big enough, then you'll overcome all the obstacles. You just got to find the why.
And so in regards to fighting then, I mean, when we talk about motivation, have you ever had the experience where you can start for a fight too far out?
Yeah, certainly from the fighter's perspective.
He's not going to admit to this, he's a trainer and he runs a camp.
From the fighter's perspective,
of course.
And to follow on with, there's a saying that, to follow on from Phil there, there's a saying that, don't sell it, be it. And I think that's key to, with yourself, with the marathon disciples and whatever, it transferred that military life into civilian life, and it was something that could relate to civilians. But anyway, going back to the athletes in my younger career, and perhaps when I had some may say a little bit, I was a little bit less experienced and perhaps not as knowledgeable. Maybe not saying no. Am I saying that I'm knowledgeable now? I'm not sure, but motivation was something that fascinated me with pro sports people, because it was a bit like, well, how can you not motivate yourself? You're doing something you love, which was a big assumption, obviously, because not every sports person does love the sport that they're in. Many, you know, they've come through from childhood and perhaps had a parent pushing them along, and so there was a big assumption of, you know, you're doing something you love, you're being extremely well paid for it. Again, another assumption, and I didn't get it. But then, you know, as Phil said, to reiterate, and obviously, you know, I'm on Phil's course, I'm going to agree with everything he says, you know, because I do agree, but it became all about finding what motivates that individual person. For some athletes, you know, particularly one that I've worked with, it was all about a fear of losing. He wasn't motivated by, when you really sort of chunked it down, he wasn't motivated by money, he wasn't motivated by fame, publicity. He just had a fear of losing, and that was his, you know, away from, you know, he just didn't want to lose. And he'd only lost once as a much younger fighter, and made sure he avenged that loss, you know. So that was a big motivator for him, and you could put that picture in his mind, and he had that picture imprinted all the time of what a loss would feel like, would look like, would taste like. Other athletes and fighters, you know, and you know, if that's what motivates them, they do want fame, they do want money, they do want the celebrity extras that may come with success in sport. And again, that's absolutely fine.
Maybe no better example than Mayweather, maybe.
Absolutely.
But he's not done bad out of being motivated.
Yeah, you know, in sport we're judged on our results, so you know, it only becomes what motivates an athlete only becomes a problem if the results aren't there. If the results are there, then you know we carry on. But you know, it's when the results aren't there that we then start looking at the real reasons behind the motivation. And I agree with what you both said in regards to, you know, the resilience. I think if that motivator is high enough, or is deep enough, then it leads into resilience. And you know, I look at a great example, you know, is Ronaldo. And again, you would say, you know, you've got all the money that you need, and then some. You've won everything. What motivates you? And I'm fairly certain. And you know, I've only gone off TV. I've never met him, obviously, but there's a higher purpose there. There's a deeper purpose, you know, in terms of his family, his children, and his home country. So those motivational drivers just go deeper and deeper. And you know, he's fascinating in terms of his training, his diligence, still day in, day out, is as it was, if not more so, than when he was a young pro.
Like when Giggs reinvented himself and got into yoga to extend his career, you know, Giggs was injury prone for season after season, and decided that he needed to change things around and became a diligent trainer. And I think as an athlete, there is a perception in pro sports that all the athletes are great, unbelievable trainers, and I suppose the people that you come into contact with at boot camp probably look at pro athletes and think, well, they must be like super motivated. Actually, a lot of them, I'm sure Rick will back me up, terrible trainers, you know, hate it. You know, there are some exceptions, you know, Ronaldo, but you use a word back there which is, I think, more important than determination, motivation, resilience.
I picked up on that, and it also made my mind flick to grit, you know what I mean, and some grit. Oh, yeah. David
Beckham became the player he was because of being sent off at the World Cup.
Yeah, adversity. Yeah.
The resilience he developed through that adversity, you know, it made him a stronger, more focused, able to withstand any kind of external pressure player. And although the worst thing for him in 1998, you know, having to be sent off against Argentina, actually I think made his career. And resilience is one of the things that I think that we struggle to install in our kids now, and we do that because we don't do so much sport at school. They don't really get disciplined as much as they used to, perhaps. I'll get on my little soapbox in a minute, I suppose, but I think we are producing kids that are less resilient. We've seen it in the military. You know, it's only 3 years ago I left the military, and the kids don't seem to be as resilient, and that's because we're not giving them the conditions, we're not giving them the opportunity to experience grit and adversity, and out of that comes resilience. It's like the boxer that wins all the time and has never really been put in a dark place, and then one time they get into a ring with the Mexican and suddenly every time he hit the Mexican he doesn't flinch, and the Mexican's hitting them really hard, and they're in that place where they've never been before because they've always been gifted and talented and they've dictated fights, they've been the one that bossed other fighters around. That's when you get tested as a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, Phil's used a saying a few times this week, which is very relevant to this conversation: train hard, fight easy. And I absolutely agree. I think resilience isn't. I think it's a learned behaviour.
Yep.
And we aren't learning it anymore. I think there's examples of a lack of resilience in our national sports. I'm sure there's examples in the corporate workplace. You'll meet people you'll come into contact with who have unbelievable resilience and others who don't. And I don't think it's something that you wake up with one morning, and I don't think it's something you're born with. I think it's a learned behaviour by doing the right things repeated.
So what? I mean, by default then, what are the right things? If it's something that is a learned behaviour, we can all go out and learn it, and we can start tomorrow. So if we was to model what gaining that resilience is, how would it look? What have you noticed?
If you started at a very small age, it's being given feedback. Sometimes fairly strong feedback about your performance, either your character or your behaviour. For me, I gave a presentation a little while ago about the millennial generation and kind of what's happening with these millennials. It's like a hot topic at the minute in business, and a lot of what I was talking about was to do with the triangle of power from a school is kind of shifted its dynamic, in my opinion. The teacher in the old days, back I'm sure when we were kids, was the most powerful part. Then you had the parent, then you had the student. if you went, that is.
I was just trying to work out who was the oldest. That's all.
Not me. But the teacher was the most important bit in that. If you got in trouble at school, you were like petrified in case the message got home as well. If there was a telephone or a letter
I've been
message.
there. I was like rushing home to get the mail before your mum got back, because you was getting a bollocking. Yeah.
And that meant that you developed resilience because you got told by a teacher when you were out of line. You clipped at home when you were out of line. I know this is a huge generalisation. I'm sure many parents do still do this, but there is more of a culture now because of the liberalism that we experience in Western culture, where if I get told off at school, I go home and say to my dad, Mr. Moylan picks on me in PE. He gives me a hard time, and then I'm into school saying, well, I want to speak to this Mr. Moylan about picking on my lad. So the power triangle's kind of shifted away from the teacher, and it's almost in the hands of the student now a little bit. And that for me means that from a very young age, they're not being told that they're shit at things. Now I know that you might say, well, you shouldn't get told that at school, but you need to be told that you don't behave like that here, and if you do behave like that here, you're out of my class and you don't come back in so you understand how to behave. Because the problem is, if you don't get that message through school, when you go out into the workplace and you have your first job, the boss doesn't care about your parents at home, and if you're not behaving the way he wants, you'll get told straight away, and that can be a little bit earth-shattering if you've gone all the way through school, kind of walking.
I had it recently. I mean, I had a lady came and stayed with me, looking to lose a decent amount of weight, and she just wasn't sticking to the programme. And of course, we know the universal law of cause and effect. In order to get a certain effect, you need to be doing certain things, to create that effect, and she just wasn't doing it. She wasn't following the programme. So we basically had a little bit of a meeting, got her in, and before I knew it, I was on the phone to her mum. And then I sort of caught myself thinking, the hell am I doing? This is a young lady. Why the hell am I talking to her mum about her actions? And that's exactly what that was,
I think it is a problem. I think the great thing about boxing is boxing is one of those sports that you can't participate in boxing without developing resilience. I remember when I was a young lad, we had a boxing gym down in our town. I went down a couple of times and got punched in the face, and it hurts. And you get in there and you've watched Rocky and it looks great, and then suddenly someone punches you with those gloves on, and you're like, wow, you know, and in that environment, you know, that sweat and blood and, you know, getting hit, giving a few, taking a few, as Joshua says, so wonderfully, and, you know, getting up early, going out training, in that environment, that's the cauldron of resilience. It's that environment. And that's why boxing is such a great sport. I think it's such a great sport for kids that perhaps don't have privilege, because it gives them that direction, it gives them that stability, that discipline, and that even that release from perhaps some of the things that they have going on outside of the gym. So you get resilience there, but obviously not a lot of kids do boxing really.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely, you know, humans, like we've said, cause and effect. Humans are habitual. So I think for me, it's about creating the right habits. And you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of fighters do come from perhaps underprivileged backgrounds and whatnot like that. So it's about encouraging the you know, what the right habits are. And there's a saying that, you know, I'm sure you know, you've come across it in psychology and mindset, but also in physical training as well. The body moves to a path of least resistance. We all want to do things we're good at, and athletes in particular are like that. You know, they will want to come in and work on their strengths, hide away from their weaknesses. So I think it's, you know, our athletes, our fighters are only as good as their weakest areas. So it's about making them focus and develop those weak links in their technique, those weak links in their mindset, their conditioning. We don't always get our own way or get what we want, but we certainly, that's our aim. And you know, there's one gym in particular that I've spent a huge amount of time in that's had a huge amount of success in boxing. And the head coach there, you know, he's got a clear ethos when you walk through the door, and every fighter knows what he expects from them. He's not always the most popular character, but everybody knows where they stand. Everybody's clear on what's expected, what the ethos is.
Culture.
It's the culture. It's exactly that. There is a big culture with you know, this particular boxing coach, and you know, as I said before, the results don't lie. This gym has had enormous success. Of course, they've had some defeats. However, in the main, they've had enormous success, and it is because of those habits. It is because the expectations are laid down, the culture's in place, and also because this trainer, and I think, you know, we talked about Sir Alex Ferguson as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
He's made examples of fighters and shown strong leadership when he's had to, and if that means, you know, maybe a good fighter moving on, then so be it. You know, boxing and combat sports do have the perhaps added advantage as well, that if a fighter isn't playing ball and adhering, a punch in the face is a good leveler for them, you know. So, you know, that's a real good motivator, getting smacked on the nose, you know.
Well, I mean, I've taken. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to round up, and then I'm going to do the afterburner. And my afterburner is, we talked about ethos, and you know, we talked about the gym and their ethos, what their culture is, and I just wondered what your two, you know, if you could pin something down and you had an ethos to pass on to other people, what that would be. So whilst I'm thinking about that, I just want to say, you know, I've taken some amazing stuff from you, and I'll play this back many times. And I'm sure anybody watching this is going to take some real nuggets of knowledge as well, you know, into their own life, whatever they're looking to do and be successful in. So, Phil, we'll start off with you with your little bit of.
Probably one of the best books that I've read this year.
Mine
is
no.
There's a book called Running Light by Craig Williams.
No.
It's a book called Culture. It's about the New Zealand All Blacks.
Picked it up as soon as you told me. I picked it up,
and it's phenomenal book, and it's not about rugby. It's about culture. That's what it's about, you know. And the lessons from the book can be transferred to business, to all sorts of sports, and it's all to do with the culture that the All Blacks have fostered, and primarily as the results weren't going their way, and they went out of the World Cup. I think it was after 2003. They had a good hard long look at themselves and said, actually, you know, we are not doing things right here, and we need to do better. Now, one of the things that's interesting is Rick mentioned that most boxers, or most athletes, like to work on their strengths. Well, the two guys that prop the All Black scrum, two brothers, I can't remember their name, they spend nearly all of their time getting coached on their weaknesses. After they won the World Cup, bearing in mind they've got an 87% success rate of winning Test rugby, the first thing they did, the day after they won the World Cup, was flew out to America to work on some of the things that they perceived were weaknesses throughout the tournament that they were displaying. Now, not only that, you know, the things that they do, like, you know, sweeping out their own changing rooms, because their mantra is nobody looks after us, we look after ourselves. All those things just create this incredible culture. It's not an accident that a country with only a few million people produce a rugby team that's got an 87% success rate in Test rugby, and the whole reason for it is culture. And if you want to understand how to develop resilience and culture, you read this book and you take some of the lessons from these New Zealand All Blacks, regardless of what sport or fitness or business you're in. There's lessons throughout the whole book. It's phenomenal.
And your ethos is?
That culture's everything.
Yeah.
That where we're at today, HPP, you know, the Academy for NLP course, it's all about, the ethos is all about culture. We create a culture of learning. That's what we do here. That's why we have these seats for our students. That's why we have the gardens. That's why we do it in rooms like this. We create a culture of learning. So the ethos is about, when you create a culture, you'll get the result. So instead of focusing on the result at the end, like focusing on turning out good practitioners, focus on creating a culture, getting the culture right, and then the course takes care of itself then. So that's my ethos. Culture is everything.
Brilliant. Rick?
A question that I often get asked by members of the public, but also by you know, peers, younger trainers or performance coaches, strength and conditioning coaches. They're looking for their magic pill. So they want to know what are the key exercises that an athlete does to make them successful. What's the key exercises to make a boxer punch harder or a boxer fitter, or what are the key foods that they eat? What's the diet plan? What's their training plan? What's the magic that we teach these guys? And I would be telling a slight fib if I said that this ethos came from me. It actually came from a mentor of mine who I discussed this with, and for a number of years I struggled to find my ethos, and we agreed on it, and it is the basics done well, and that is my ethos.
Yeah.
You know, what do we do exercise wise? We do the basics. We do them very well. We eat the basics. We eat the right foods. We live the right life. The basics done well, and that provides the foundation on what we build the success tower.
Going back to that book as well. I'm not plugging this book, by the way, but it is a great book.
Amazon affiliate link.
Registration forms. But in that book, they talk a lot about one of the reasons why the All Blacks are so good in the last 10 minutes at phase after phase, piling on pressure, because they drill the basics over and over and over again. What you see with kids now with all sorts of sports is they want to do the fancy, trick. They want to have that magic moment. Well, what the All Blacks think is, when that trick happens, it will happen naturally, and it will happen born out of the fact that you can do the basics with your eyes closed over and over and over again. And what they do, as anyone that's into rugby knows, is they just turn over phase after phase of pressure the last 5 minutes, and often score. When other teams, when they get into the fourth or fifth phase, end up knocking the ball on, or it gets turned over.
A saying that I used to live by was, you can't fire a cannon from a canoe.
Oh, I love to say, yeah.
Yeah. But I re-evaluated it to the basics done well, and I fairly agree.
Well, it's a mantra of special forces, SES, SBS.
That's where the chap who influenced me with that statement, that he's special forces.
Yeah, so if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us.
Good enough for me. Yeah.
I've never heard that. I'm in.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I tell all my trainers and all the staff at camp, the only thing we need to do to stand head and shoulders above any other, camp in the country is the basics done well, because there's so many people, like you said, looking for those little, you know, the little marginal things. Just do the basics well, you know, and that'll carry over the line.
Yeah.
For me, I think you know, with everything you said, one of my mantras really is there is no change without honesty. You know, and I think sometimes people are out there bullshitting themselves about so many things. And the minute you strip back that bullshit and you start being honest in whatever way, things start to change. So that's what I would kind of say. Phil, any little afterburners before we wrap up?
No, I'm out.
You're out?
I'm out of afterburners.
Rick?
Yeah, I'm all burnt out as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Hard week.
Yeah.
No, it's been a long week, so you know, thanks for taking your time out to sit and chat to us. Been great. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.